Welcome everybody to the Identity Store Facebook question and answer session. Hopefully we'll find this a bit of a useful time to go through some of your questions and just to show some of the different techniques. So I'm going to try with a couple of questions that came in this week. I have got quite a long list from things people have sent in, and if I don't get to them today, I will get to them on another session. But the first one I thought we'd tackle today is from Tulu, which is about getting her chisel to work. She bought this mallet and was still struggling and was asking if there was any better mallet. But I actually think this is a great mallet. So I thought maybe I'd go back to basics and think about what can be an issue and how to set up to get really good stitching chisel holes. So to start with, it's worth thinking about your setup. You want to have a good stone block underneath. This is just going to stop any kind of vibrations and any kind of movement from sort of creating bounce. And then on top of that, I've got my poundo board. This could equally be a piece of thick veg tan leather or a poly board, like the acrylic ones, like the chopping boards. We have the poundo board and acrylic cutting mats on the website. Basically, it's going to stop the tools from being blunted when they go through, and it's going to give something for them to go into so they get a clean hole through the leather. So I've got that set up now, and that'll give me some good support. So the next tip for doing your chisel holes is to strop your chisel. So you might not think about stropping chisels. It tends to be things people think about for their knives, but it is important to do stropping on these as well. So if you get some Jeweler's Rouge, which is an agent that helps stropping, and I'm just using a piece of the stallion leather here. I use it sometimes on the flesh side, but for this I'm just going to use it on the grain side. But we do have some strops on the strop section of the website, and it's definitely worth investing in one of Peter's grey strops. They've been made with these kind of paste in the tannage, so you can literally go straight to them, and they're like a grey colour. So I'm just going to do a bit of a rub of the Jeweler's Rouge onto here. Hopefully you can just see this. I will hold it up close in a moment. So going down 45 degrees and the other way. This will sharpen and take off any burrs that cause the leather to catch and just polish out the tip points of the chisel. Okay, so I'm just was checking the comments to make sure I'm not talking to thin air again. That's weird. I'm also going to just show you how to use the groover, because I know people like Daniel. I don't know if you're on, Daniel. Oh yeah, I can see you're here. Thank you. You wanted to know a few beginner's tips. So this is the groover, very handy tool, and you can use that angle there to line up and create a channel for your stitches. I'm doing it on this dark leather so that hopefully you can see it. And you get a little tail coming off. Is that kind of showing a bit? So you can see a line there. And that gives you a parallel neat line for you to put your stitching holes into and for you to follow. It also has the benefit that your stitches will sit slightly recessed into that channel, and that means that when you're if it's something like on a bag where it's rubbing against you and there's abrasion, your stitches are going to not wear through, they're going to last a bit longer. So it has quite a few purposes putting the groove in, and you can just adjust it and use it as a decorative line as well. So we've got our line for putting our chisel in. I always start when I'm chiseling one away from the top, which means I always know wherever I'm starting from, when I'm going to match my seams up, that my first hole is exactly the same width down. So you line it up so that your chisel is just over the first line. And last tip before we start, push it into a beeswax block. This has the advantage of putting a little bit of a wax coating onto the tips, which lubricates it going through the leather, helps protect them and keep them sharp, and helps give you a nice clean hole and a nice drive through. So then we're on to our poundo board block, a couple of taps, and it's gone right through. In fact, it's gone through so nicely, it's gone into the mat a bit. And then as you move along, you go into the hole you've just made, the last hole with the next hole of the chisels, so that you always end up with an even row of stitching. And make sure when you're doing this that you keep your angle the same as you're moving along. Don't twist the chisel, because you want your little diamond slits to look neatly aligned, which is all these little tips that help make your stitching look really neat. So I've now got my holes through in the leather, and I'm just going to take my diamond stitch awl, code 31218 on the website, and keeping it at the same angle as the chisel, just open up the leather. What will happen often is that some leathers almost self-heal and close up together, and this just gives you a nice even hole from the back as well as the top, so that when you're stitching you're not fighting from coming up from the other side. And it just makes sure that if you're going through any bits, for example any scar tissue or anything like that where you've got a bit of a denser collagen fibre mass, you've opened this up. And it might seem a bit laborious, but it's just so worth doing at this point. It really will speed your stitches up. These blades on these stitching awls are quite sharp, so don't go too far in. But it just means you've got your holes a little more open, so hopefully you can see that, and you can see on the back that they've gone through. Okay, so that's how to set up your block to get your chisels to work. So nice rock hard surface with not too many vibrations. Strop your chisel. The Tandy chisels are made from a very hard metal, so they will take stropping and stay sharper. And finally, push into a beeswax block before you start. This is true for even your drive punches as well. And if you were thinking that this looked like a thin piece of leather and it looked like it went through nicely, I've got a thicker piece of veg tan here, so I'll just show you it on that one as well. Hopefully you can see the holes and the groove line there. Okay, and that will just set you up ready for your stitching, which we'll cover on a different session. I know Pixie was asking about stitching. There are some really good tutorials from both Nigel Armitage and Ian Atkinson on YouTube on stitching, where they do it in real time, how to really perfect your saddle stitch. So I don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel. I would suggest you go over and watch those on their channels. You can find the links to them on our information useful links page. But what I will cover next week is backstitch, which is a very useful stitch to use in a different kind of set of circumstances. So we'll look at that next week, Pixie, if that's okay.